This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast with Gary Taylor.
Hello and welcome to another AMHT podcast. Today we're exploring the Aston Martin story in book form. This is a company whose history is filled with innovation, racing triumphs and personalities. And let's not be shy, more than a few moments when survival itself seemed uncertain. To guide us through that story, I'm delighted to be joined by automotive historian and author Russell Hayes, whose new 2-volume work named Aston Martin, The Entire Story, and published by Evro Publishing, offers the most comprehensive history ever written about the marque. So today we're going to talk about what Russell discovered while researching the book, the characters and the moments that defined Aston Martin's history. Hello Russell, welcome to the podcast.
Hello Gary, and thank you very much for having me on.
It's a great pleasure. Now, this book, The Entire Story, there's nowhere to hide on that title, is there? You're leaving yourself up for a hiding. You might get someone coming to you and says, "Oh yes, but you've forgotten this or you've forgotten that." It's a big title, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out, but originally that was not the original title. It was going to be a history of Aston Martin. I started it back in 2020 when I contacted Evro, just at the start of the pandemic, on the off chance they had any work, and by chance they wanted a marque history of Aston Martin, but it grew and grew and grew, and by the time we ended up with 2 volumes, which were never planned, they decided that it was worthy of the title of The Entire Story.
£195, it's not cheap, but quality never is. And this is a quality 2-volume production. And to emphasise that quality, well, it's been announced, Octane magazine, Book of the Month, Classic and Sports Car, Book of the Month. You must be quite proud of that.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, there's probably a few other gongs along the way, which I haven't seen. So tell us about yourself. Tell the listener about yourself and your background.
Well, going way back to the end of the 1980s, my first job was a graduate trainee at Haymarket Publishing, and we were taken around various magazines to learn our trade. The one that I settled on was What Car?
Yes,
because that Haymarket makes a lot of its money out of the automotive titles, and that was where my interest led me. So that's where I started on What Car, and then there was a magazine called Complete Car, which was a monthly magazine, ran for a few years. And from there, I went freelancing and did lots of various things, like wrote for the Times, the Evening Standard, and eventually I talked my way into Top Gear as a researcher when it was the original half-hour program from Birmingham.
Oh, really? You were back in Pebble Mill time?
Way back in the Quentin Wilson days and
yes,
just the very early Clarkson times.
Have you always been interested in motoring?
Yeah, from the get-go. Yeah. And, I suppose like a lot of people, father or mother influences us. My father, when I think was about 10, said, "You ought to stop reading comics," and shoved a copy of classic and thoroughbred cars into my hand, and that was it.
That was a major publication at the time, wasn't it? Classic Car, as it was called then. They went to Thoroughbred and Classic Car.
Yeah.
A cracking magazine. What inspired you to write this story in such depth?
Well, I'd already had a kind of grounding in quite some depth because I'd done a previous work on the V8 for Powerbank Press.
Yes.
And that covered 1969 to 2000. And that was a very big book, and that I did that in very great depth. I think I did about 35 different interviews for that book.
Oh, right.
So I felt I had a base to work from.
Yeah.
And after that, I'd been writing for Vantage magazine. So I was going to be in the Aston Martin sphere before I started on this one. Then, as usual, it starts with a synopsis. You write down what your chapter order is going to be. You write down perhaps what's going to be in the side panels, in the boxes, so slightly peripheral to the story. It looked simple on paper. It looked like about 3 sheets of paper.
Right.
But when you added in the racing, it became far bigger than it was ever planned to be.
Well, I was going to say, in your mind, you probably thought it could be quite chunky, but it split into 2 volumes to make the book manageable, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, there was
over 700 pages.
there was some decision of, to be made about split. It wasn't originally planned to be it was originally planned to be one volume.
Yeah.
So there was some quite discussion about whether it could go to two, because that involves a slipcase as well, which is extra cost.
Yes.
But there seemed to be a natural split at 1980, and it naturally split into two halves of about the same size.
Did you find that as you're researching it, I think you've implied it already, that the story just simply grew, didn't it?
Yeah, and I think I'm a bit of a completist. The more I had available to me, the more I wanted to get it in. And I was lucky. I had quite a lot of source material already, but people started giving me stuff. I spent a bit of time with Michael Bowler over the years, and he was clearing out his garage and gave me about a decade's worth of Aston Martin magazines from the 1980s, which were full of interviews with people who'd been there in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Yes.
Who were still current then. People like Frank Feely and Harold Beach and John Wyer, indeed. So I had a lot of nice material there, which I could quote from. And I also had accumulated quite a stash of Aston Martin Owners Club magazines from the 60s and 50s, which I'd used for the V8 book, but I'd only focused on the V8 parts of it. And then you realise there's much more in there. There are people from who were racing in the 1930s, putting their memories down in the 1960s.
So your research was through the AMOC, your past magazines, past interviews that you managed to find. I think the Aston Martin Heritage Trust helped on some occasions as well. Did you come across any documents or photographs that you'd never seen before?
I did come across some photographs I'd never seen before, and that's always a real thrill.
Yeah.
Because the picture work for this book was almost, it wasn't as much as the text, but it was a pretty important part of it. It's sometimes what you only know what you're looking for after you've been immersed in it for such a long time. I was looking through some of Brian Joslin's photos.
Oh, Brian Joslin, yes.
Yeah. And I looked at the black and whites, which aren't seen very often. And I realised that in there were Lagonda Rapides being built at Newport Pagnell. I don't think I'd ever seen that before. And also there was just a casual shot in amongst one of the albums in Le Mans of a Lagonda Rapide prototype before it had the double radiator front, sitting there as a tender car to the Aston Martin racing team.
Mm.
And I'd never seen that before. I also found a photograph of one of the Lagonda prototypes that made in the 1950s, which was never built. I think it was called the Brown Bomber. That was just parked in a street in London.
The whole book, the 2 volumes, it reads as a story. I've got the book here. I haven't read it all through just yet because it needs proper justice in a few evenings with an appropriate beverage, I suggest. But it reads as a story all the way through. Is that your way of writing? Because some books you can read on Aston Martin or other car can be just cold facts. I mean, this is a narrative. Is that your style?
Where I can, I do like to do that. I do like to tell a story, and I like to use quotes from people and interviews as punctuation. You keep the facts, and the chronology takes care of itself. Things go in a particular order, but often there's the motorsport is happening at the same time as the road cars, so there's a crossover there.
Yeah.
But I use people quoting as a kind of form of punctuation, because I think it livens the text up, and it does make it more like a story. So you talk about something being developed, something coming out, then you have somebody saying, "Oh, well, we tried this, it didn't work at first, and then we tried something else, and that was a real hit, and I couldn't believe we'd done that, or that was really expensive." Something to just add a sense of context.
The familiar names in Aston Martin, Lionel Martin, David Brown, Victor Gauntlet, plenty of others, I'm sure. Are there any names in your research that you feel tend to get forgotten, that need to be highlighted?
I wouldn't say that they're forgotten, but I think that
not given the credit that they should have.
I think Peter Sprague and George Minder perhaps could be emphasised more than they are.
Yeah.
and of course Alan Curtis.
Yeah.
Because they came to Aston Martin as quite, as relatively young men and young businessmen, and they just let the ideas rip. They were very open to ideas, and from that came the Wedge Lagonda, which was absolutely crazy for a company which had just come out of bankruptcy to try and attempt to do something so advanced. Plus the 1977 V8 Vantage. So they injected this period of recovery. They kind of supercharged it, really,
Yes.
to redefine what Aston Martin was going into the 1980s.
You spoke a few times about the V8 and the 1980s. I was curious, when you write a book of this size, did you start at the beginning and finish at the end, or did you say, right, I'm going to deal with the 1980s because you're comfortable in that era, and then you bounce back? Where did you start?
I did start at the beginning.
Yeah,
because the beginning is the thing I was least familiar with.
Right.
So I knew I would need to invest most time in it.
How difficult was that for you?
Yeah, it was quite difficult because those kinds of cars are so far out of certainly my experience.
Yes.
At my age, and I'm not a youngster. Cars from the 1920s and the turn of the century, they are so much different to what we have now. And I felt I actually needed to give myself a bit of an education, so I spent a morning at Ecurie Bertelli.
Yes.
Asking them to explain to me what friction shock absorbers were and how the cars were put together, because I couldn't get it right in my head until I'd actually seen it in the metal.
And I guess that the learning from your point of view, it created a new enthusiasm for you. Perhaps you had a greater appreciation for the pre-war cars.
I think I certainly did. Yes. Trying to appreciate their qualities.
Was that probably the most difficult chapter, probably one that took the most time, the early stuff?
Yes. I mean, there is the accepted reference book on it, the Inman Hunter and Alan Archer book.
Yeah.
And I was able to consult that using the British Library, which is a marvellous source of help to me for reference books, which you can't get anymore. And yeah, and also the early racing was quite hard, because rather than just spell out a season, race after race after race, a list of races.
Oh, that can be hard work. I've read those.
That can be hard work.
Oh, yeah.
And you try to give a bit of punctuation by people's experiences, things that happened. And I also use the British Newspaper Archive to get contemporary newspaper reports. You get sometimes little details like, the amount of spectators who were at a particular race, or a traffic jam that happened, or an accident that happened at that particular race, which isn't necessarily reported elsewhere.
Throughout the book, and it does go very much up to date, doesn't it? I mean, let me just, there we go. I've got the volume here. So I'm actually curious as to when you decided to finish it, because you say you started it 2020 and it was published late last year. So it's a 5-year project. Yeah. And I'm looking at the last few pages of this book, and it includes Adrian Hallmark. It includes the new Vanquish. I mean, last year, in 2025-24, Aston Martin were going through an intense period there, bringing up models left, right, and centre. Did you feel like going to them and saying, "Will you please stop? I need to close this book"? Where in your own mind did you say, "I need to draw the line now"?
That's a good question. I mean, just to go back a little bit on the time period, it was quite a broken time period, because I started in 2020, then I submitted it in 2022, then it took a bit of a pause because it went to the back of the queue in the publishing queue, because there were other books that needed to come out first. Then it was picked up again in late 2023, so it was being edited through 2024 and being put together then.
Yeah.
And I got to as far as February 2025, and I said, right, can I just, now we've come back to it, I need to add these new models back into, can we squeeze them into the end of the last chapter? And they could. They let me squeeze in another 500 words in another couple of models.
Yes.
So yeah, I took it up to the wire. It had to be as up to date as it could possibly be before it went off to the printers, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it covers Formula One as well, and we've got the Valkyrie in there. So, for the entire story, I think it's pretty much as up to date as as it can be, because it's since publication, I don't think there's been anything from Aston Martin of note. I think it is a very comprehensive story. Is there anything in the in your research in looking back over history? Was there anything that changed your view on Aston Martin? Perhaps an accepted view, and you think, well, hang on, there's a difference of opinion there.
Well, I think what came across to me is if you put together what's happened over the last 20 years, it's huge. There's such a lot of variety and creativity in what's happened since Gaydon was inaugurated. And also because there are so many specials which are hardly ever seen in public.
Yes.
But they are marvellous things, and they're produced and they go away into collections, and we only ever see them at concours, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
But if you think about, the list of things which happened in the last 20 years, I think that was surprising that how much content there was. You start at the, for example, the 177 in 2009, then the Lagonda concept SUV, which was very far-sighted and, quite a good-looking car, but quite far ahead of its time.
You're right. I mean, yes. I mean, in your book, you don't, go to the default cars of DB5. I mean, you've covered the Lagonda SUV concept and obviously the Signet. It was quite refreshing to see the Lagonda being mentioned. I remember seeing that at the Geneva show, and it got such a mixed reaction there. But 2007, I think it was 2009. Ahead of its time. Because I've got the DBX.
Yeah, and you've got and there were all these other things like Zagato Astons, which were made in Warwickshire.
Yes.
Not Italy at all.
No.
A whole string of Zagato acts at the Vulcan, which is just unbelievable. And also, continuation cars, culminating perhaps in the Goldfinger DB5s.
Yes.
Which we never see, but the very idea of those is crazy.
You've mentioned Goldfinger, may I say, and I'm going to have to raise the subject of James Bond. To what extent in your storytelling and your history did you had to do with James Bond? There's plenty of books in James Bond and the Aston Martin cars, and it's obviously very relevant to its history. But you didn't want it to dominate the book, did you?
I didn't. So, because as you say, there are lots of books on the James Bond cars, and a couple in particular are absolutely excellent. So I decided to put them right at the end of the book in an annex.
Yes.
So that people could dip into them if they wanted to, but they didn't interrupt the flow. They didn't dominate that period. Because in any case, there was a period in Aston Martin's history in the 70s and 80s where the James Bond thing didn't figure at all.
No.
Completely went away, and and we didn't have DVDs or videos of James Bond. It was on telly once a year at Christmas, so that association had gone on for a long time. But I decided to put them in the back, and I decided just to talk about how they were made. The interaction between the factory and the filmmakers.
Yes,
because eventually Gaydon started making cars for the Bond films. The relationship was so close.
Yes.
They were like manufacturers of James Bond cars for the films. And I was lucky to have David King as an interviewee who goes right through me in all the Gaydon years. And he talked to me about how they put together the Bond cars and the challenges.
Did you come across anything that you wanted to include, but you couldn't quite find the quality of research to back it up? Was there anything you left out?
I think if there was space, I would have liked to have gone into more depth on manufacturing and how Aston Martins were built.
Yes, that would have been fascinating, wouldn't it? Yeah.
That's almost like another book. But, the craft that went into cars being hand-built at Newport Pagnell, and then the sophistication of the Gaydon production process. I think had there been more space, I would have liked to have enlarged on that and had more images
Yeah.
of that kind of thing.
Did the publisher say 750 pages? That's enough? Was that?
Yeah, well, I was way over my limit very early on, but they were very nice. They were very nice. They said, "Don't hack it back." I tried to hack it back as much as I could, but
Yeah.
they were very good to me.
The manufacturer, actually, you saying that, because one of my questions, is there another area that you would like to expand or volume 3, if you like? I mean, the manufacturing could be quite fascinating because, go through the hand-built era of the pre-war cars up to Newport Pagnell. Then the DB7 was a hand-built but slightly more automated method of production at Bloxham. Then it became another step onward again. It would be quite fascinated to follow that lineage, wouldn't it?
Yes, and there were lots of subcontractors involved as well, people who made bodies at one point or another, or people made panels,
Yes.
engines which came from Germany. There's that whole era of the Cologne engine plant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's quite a lot of material there to be gone through.
All right. So there's another book coming to be pitched. Well, do you have any other books in the pipeline? Anything, not necessarily Aston Martin? Are you working on something else?
Well, I did a book on Audis last year. I do some books for an American publisher called Motor Books, and I've got a book on Audi S and RS, which is coming out in the autumn.
Yeah.
And I'm working on
Alpine as well, haven't you?
Yes, that actually crossed over with Aston Martin. I did what I hope is a near definitive history of Alpine, the first, certainly the largest book that's ever been done in England for Balaban Press, and that was published in 2024. So that crossed over with Aston Martin. So I seem to be just doing books which begin with the letter A.
Well, that's all right. So it gives you something to look forward to for the rest of your career. I mean, there's plenty up to Z, isn't there? Could be
Yes.
Bentley next time, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah, Bentley. Yeah. Citroen.
Yeah. So you've written the most detailed history of Aston Martin. I think I'm looking through my bookshelf, and I don't think I've got there such a comprehensive history of this. I've got a Palawan, which probably goes the nearest to it. So, with that in mind, what does Aston Martin mean to you now? You've gone there from the beginning. There's stuff you didn't know. You've done the research, and there's stuff you probably had to change your mind on. What does Aston Martin mean to you now after doing all this work behind it?
It kind of feels like an old friend who has always been around.
Yeah.
It has all these different associations for me, like the Newport Pagnell era, the Hanworth era, Hanworth Feltham, the Gain era, and all these larger than life characters who seem quite familiar to me now. And one interesting thing I found, which really struck me, quite by accident, I found an audio recording of A.C. Bertelli.
Oh wow!
There's an archive in the Coventry Warwick University where there's a whole load of interviews with people from various car companies deposited, and they were made in the 1970s. So you've got a Bertelli talking as an old man in the 1970s, but pretty sharp recollections of his time, and you hear his lovely Welsh accent. So, which you would never have known about, really. You could have guessed it was there. He suddenly brought to life as a real person. That name is so special, isn't it? It has such a ring to it. If you just say it, it sounds so meaningful and charismatic. So
yes, it does.
It carries a weight of history and a weight of meaning that you can't really imagine. It's such a survivor. I think it's, having a major or a minor crisis is the only way it carries on. That is the permanent state. But if you look at how many times it's always been rescued, even from the early days, by the people who just love it.
Is that what you found in your book when you were researching it? It was just a passion for it. Perhaps not necessarily a business case for it, but a passion for it.
No, people from the 1930s onwards, really.
Yeah,
who just didn't want to see it go down and just put their own money in, from Aldington in the 30s all the way up to Peter Sprague, just sitting in his bath, he said, in America, thinking, I can't let this company. This is too bad. I can't let this car company go down.
Yes. Did you manage to speak to any of the current board? Anyone high up the food chain at Aston Martin at the moment?
I didn't, and I kind of made what I think was a pragmatic decision not to speak to any current people, because they are actually quite difficult to get hold of. First off,
yes.
So waiting and waiting and waiting would have probably held me up with the rest of the book in any case. And I felt I probably, if I'd done that, should have included the more recent people who preceded them, people like Andy Palmer and Ulrich Betts.
Yes.
I think that's for another time.
Yeah.
Because to allow them to have more space.
I think that's the point. If you speak to someone now that's in the company, it'll probably be on brand message. It's when
exactly
left.
They're constrained, and it's always better to get people when they've left, and when they've not long left, just retired is kind of like the sweet spot, really.
Yeah. In your mind, what are the main pivotal points in Aston Martin history where it went from one era to another? Do you have any clue of that? Do you see any trigger points, any pivotal points in the history?
Yeah, I think if you go through the decades, perhaps the second series cars in 1932, when Bertelli realised that you couldn't keep making your own gearboxes, your own back axles. It was ruinously expensive, and you started introducing proprietary parts. That was a turning point and drop the prices. They dropped the prices by about 25%, and that kept things going. Obviously, 1947, David Brown picking the company up and combining the Lagonda six-cylinder engine with the DB2 style to create the modern Aston Martin. The Aston Martin became a six-cylinder GT car for the first time.
Yes,
with the DB2. Then, of course, you've got the D158. That's another pivot. Really shoots it into the league of very sophisticated exotic cars, which can bear comparison with things like Ferraris. The Le Mans win in 59, 76 Lagonda, the wedge Lagonda, which was, madness when you think about it.
Oh, I remember seeing it when I was a teenager on the front cover of Motor Magazine, the show issue. That was just crazy.
But what about as a car to shoot Aston Martin right back into the public consciousness?
Yeah.
So did the job.
Yes.
And kept the lights on with sales to Middle Eastern countries. Then you've got the Ford buyout in 1987, and you can truly say that I think that those 20 years that Ford had the company, they preserved it, they saved it. The amount of money they poured into it, they made that investment work for itself so much more. So for so many years after they left.
And talking of saving of the company, every model that Aston Martin produces, it's a vital car. They don't have the luxury for one of them to be the pup. But do you feel that there are, when you was doing this book, that there are several cars that were considered to be, that saved the company? DB7 is considered to be one.
Yes. Vanquish moved the construction on, so that in the bonded aluminium structures, which were then developed into the VH cars, and that's lasted until the present day. That philosophy, of aluminium construction.
That's a good comment. You don't tend to think of the Vanquish, but that was a total gear shift in manufacturing, wasn't it?
It was a manufacturing game changer, certainly, and also perhaps the VH, if we can call it VH 2005 V8 Vantage. The numbers that car sold in was unprecedented for Aston Martin.
Have you driven any Aston Martins? You've been in a few?
I've been in a few. I think I have a vague memory way back of when I was on a car magazine actually driving one of the original DB7 press demonstrators. And I think it was the one that eventually caught fire and destroyed itself.
I think they refer to it as a combustible vent or some sort of ignition event, don't they? They like to refer to it as catching fire. Yeah, but I know the ones you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember driving that back late at night from a photo shoot somewhere. But I have to rely on the kindness of others to give me writing Aston Martin, really.
How does someone buy this book? They can go to evropublishing.com, can't they?
Yes. Yeah.
And order it there. There are some specialist car book retailers from there as well. And I'm sure there are some on other online retailers as well. So I think if you search for Aston Martin, the entire story by Russell Hayes, you'll be able to find it, or go to evropublishing.com. And I'm sure they'll quite happily send you one.
Evro is a good place to start because they've got a number of sample pages. You can actually have a read of samples of the book, and there's lots of pictures as well. So it gives you a good flavour. So
go to them, and as you say, there are some preview pages there as well, which will give you a taste of what to find. Russell, it's been great. Is there anything else you'd like to finish on?
No, well, long may Aston Martin continue is all I have to say.
Are you going to give Aston Martin a rest for a bit?
I think quite possibly, yes. I've got 2 new projects on the way which I can't talk about now, and they're not related to Aston Martin at all.
Well, I'm sure we will be writing for Aston Martin soon, because we do our own publication called Aston, which you've done for this year, Aston 27. I think you did one for Aston 26 beforehand. And Steve Wakefield, has he been on the phone for this year?
Not just yet, but I have submitted some ideas to him.
It's always I love reading your stuff, Russell. It just flows and it comes through as passion. So thank you very much for the work you do on Aston, and thank you for doing a definitive book on Aston Martin from start to finish. I can't really think of anyone that's another one that exists at the moment. So thank you for your time and giving it to us enthusiasts. I mean, it's good. I think it's an essential purchase for anyone's bookshelf.
Thank you very much.
Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.